business talent and has established at least 3 IBM-wide global programs aimed to attract, develop, and progress women in technical career paths to achieve executive levels. Susan is a graduate of New York University, where she received a Bachelor of Arts in Computer Science and Math and an MBA in International Business and Finance. She serves as a member of the Board of Trustees here at RIT and has since 2001. Susan is married and the mother of 2 children. Now I'm pleased to introduce Susan.
Thank you very much, Lisa. And thank you and Lisa Cauda and the others at RIT for inviting me to address this audience. It's a topic that's near and dear to my heart, and hopefully you know those who have joined this call will learn something from this. But I also look forward to the Q&A section at the end of this call because that's where I learn as well. So with that, what I plan to cover today is I'd say 3 topics. First is why is this such an important topic? Why is it a business imperative? Second, I'll get into some conclusions that were found in a study that we did at IBM on our women executives, and I'll also add to that some additional studies that really corroborate the findings that we had within IBM on what makes women executives successful in a company. And then third, I'm going to dive a little bit into technical women in particular, so women in IT but also in technical fields, and some of the challenges we're facing there and some of what we're trying to do at IBM as well that could be replicated elsewhere. In my career, 33-year career, I've spent 18 of those years in executive management, and all of my time in total management, I've managed technical employees. For the last 10 years, I have focused very much on the advancement of technical women and how to really proactively manage women's careers. And I'll give you some insights into what we're doing and lessons learned. So with that, let me move to the next slide. So what the business imperative for women? First and foremost, women make up 50% of the workforce. In fact, I think I saw some statistics recently that said even more than 50% women are, or more than 50% of the graduates coming out of college are women, and especially in the sciences, and therefore, having them play very active and important leadership roles in industry is absolutely critical for the skills that we need at that level. And I'll talk a little later about what we see and some studies show, women bring to the table. Also, as we want to add more women, to the workforce, particularly in certain fields, women look for role models, and therefore having women in senior leadership positions, C-suite and beyond, is absolutely critical to, not only, be role models, but then to also coach and also working with their male counterparts, advance women at lower levels in the company. And then this last point is quite interesting. It really creates an organization that's reflective of its customer base. I recall hearing an external speaker at IBM many years ago talk about how they were asked, they were working in a particular company in a sales organization, and and actually there was a small count coverage for a particular client that was an all-male team, and the client, who happened to be a woman in a C-suite position, asked the client team, come back when you have a woman that you're going to put in front of me to talk to me. And I've heard, various anecdotes of similar types of scenarios where women-owned companies, and actually, if they move on to the next page, you'll see the prevalence of women-owned companies is it just begs the question, or really begs the need for having more women who are able to interact with other women executives. And by the way, I'm not saying here, just so everyone understands, I'm not saying men can't do this, but we're seeing more and more of the desire and the request by women-owned business for where are your female executives in your companies. So on this slide, this is an old slide, but I decided to put it in here because honestly, a lot of the data is probably even more significant today, 10 years later in 2014, the fact that 10.4 million firms back in 2004 were owned by women, both majority-owned, a significant amount also being majority-owned by women, generating, more than $1 trillion, almost $2 trillion actually, in sales revenue. And the fact that, women still make up a large part of the buyers for many industries as well. So women as a force both in owning companies, running companies, as well as being purchasers of what companies produce is actually becoming and has been, prior to that time, prior to 2004, it was growing dramatically. And I believe, recent catalyst studies probably will show it's continued at that level of growth. Now, why is this important to have women within companies really have high-level positions? Catalyst back then had also done a study that showed these results. Some of you may have seen them then. But of 353 Fortune 500 companies studied, it was shown that when women, or the companies that had a very high representation, more than one woman in their senior management team, they had 35% higher return on equity than those companies in this Fortune 500 that had lower women representation in their ranks. Also, there was 34% higher total return to shareholders within those companies that had a higher representation of women in senior management. Yet, in 2014, 10 years later, women occupy just 16.9% of Fortune 500 corporate board seats. And progress has been very, very slow over the last 10 years. It's been growing. Now, these are board seats, growing at only, 3.3% in the last 10 years. And, it may or may not surprise you that only 5% of CEOs at Fortune 500 companies are women. I'm very pleased to say at IBM we have our first woman CEO in Ginny Rometty, and it's actually quite exciting to be one of those 5%, but that 5% is still way too low. So there is still, concerns raised by Catalyst, raised by others and other organizations on why is it so slow? Why don't we have more? And especially if you look at the impact that women can have, not only, of course, on the ROE and the TRS, as you saw previously, but the needs in business today, as business has been just growing dramatically in more global businesses. Global businesses, just by definition, are, therefore more centralized, as you're trying to manage a very dispersed set of organizations that geographically are dispersed as well as culturally, very dispersed. And women have been found, and these are also some results from a Catalyst study, women's strengths are in that they are very collaborative. They're open to new ideas. They're able to, have many different relationships, not only at different levels, but also with very, very, different types of cultures. Something that I know women are often, it's often spoken about how women are very good multitaskers. Actually, I find that could actually be a good thing, and it can also be a bad thing. Sometimes we multitask a little too much. But I think, certainly when you look at the dynamics of today's business, being 24/7 because of the global nature of the business, the need to also be able to drive innovation, at every level, no matter what industry your company is in, the ability to be able to work, at various times with various folks on different topics, and really be adaptive. Unfortunately, the slides somehow, the formatting got a little mixed up here, but to be adaptive is absolutely a need for all executives, and women do bring that to the table. I recently had the honor, really, of my boss paying me a compliment, which I hadn't thought of for myself, which was that I'm very versatile, he said. in being able to work across various levels, within the company, all the way from our technical folks, even our technical folks at the executive level, working with our senior most executives, who are not technical in some cases, and being able to really bridge between those. It really is a skill that many women have and should definitely take advantage of. The quote here from a very recent Time.com article from this year, I think was really quite telling, right? There's a growing evidence that in today's marketplace, the female management style is not only distinctively different, but also essential. And I think that's the key. I think the difference has been pointed out over many years of studies. The fact that it really is essential to today's business world is really quite telling. So on the next slide here, we did a study at IBM back in 2012 with 639 of our women executives in IBM, of which actually a survey went out to 639. We had a 47% response rate, which is actually quite good. And then we followed that up with one-on-one interviews with 450 of the women executives at IBM. And this study was run from October of 2012 to January 2013. And I'll just point out, 66% of IBM's executive women are working moms at IBM. That's a pretty significant number. And it's a significant percentage. It's a significant number when you look at the number of employees and executive managers that IBM has. It's a very big company. The findings from that study of what makes women successful from their perspective. And by the way, these interviews were run by non-executive women, so it was a chance for them to hear firsthand from these women executives. And, first and foremost, which is really doesn't appear on this chart, every one of the women said, number one, you have to be competent. You have to be a high performer. You have to consistently perform at a very high level, right? That goes without saying. So it was one of the other maybe unwritten things that are important to really be successful. And it came down to these three key findings that you see on this chart. Be visible, plan your career, and integrate work and life. And so let me just give you a little bit on each of those. Being visible. I've experienced this myself in my career, certainly earlier in my career, and I see this day in, day out, men and women, but more predominantly with women, in that there's a belief that our results will just be recognized. We don't need to do a whole lot of marketing or selling of our accomplishments or of our work that we've been doing. So the finding here on be visible, it's about being in the visible jobs, making sure that you are in jobs where you will get that recognition because it's a strategic or an important part of the business. But it's also a message about what you need to do as individuals, as either a non-exec or an exec, to make sure that your accomplishments are being seen. And I'm not saying be obnoxious. There are some people, men and women, who maybe go a little too far in selling themselves. But here there needs to be a balance. And women, I would say by far, the women I've interacted with within and outside of IBM, need to do more of that nice, good marketing of what they've done. Be prepared. I advise everybody I talk to, be prepared with your elevator speech. If you were to run into your CEO in the elevator, and you had less than a minute to, if they asked you what's new, what would you say? And how would you really make it in a nutshell without being too, too laborious and long? Second, plan your career. And this really goes to the point I just made earlier of being on those visible projects. Plan your career means really understand your weaknesses, understand where, and your strengths, by the way, and where do you want to go? I mean, do you have a goal in mind? And it doesn't have to be, you don't have to have the final answer 5 years, 10 years in advance, but what are some of the jobs that are appealing to you and that you aspire to, and go learn about those jobs, what it takes to get into those jobs, and then plan your career. Plan those job steps that are going to address your weaknesses, that are going to take advantage of your strengths, and that are going to also get you visibility to people that you're going to need along the way as you build your career. So being very deliberate in planning your career is important, and I can point to many times in my career where I've been tapped on the shoulder and told this is your next job without me, I wasn't even looking. But there were other times where it dawned on me that I needed to ask, that I needed to make it clear what I wanted to do next. And it was a scary proposition, but in the end, when I did it, when I finally got up the nerve to ask for that next job, it happened. In some cases, it happened immediately. In other cases, it maybe took a little longer. But it's because I had a plan. I had an idea of what I wanted to do. And this last point is a very is one that I think we all struggle with, integrating work and life. It's something that I personally am a big believer in. You have to be happy in both your personal life and your professional life. In order for your professional career to actually progress, you have to be happy. You have to wake up every morning and want to do what you're doing, and be satisfied, at least satisfied with that you're doing a good job in both. And to me, if any of you read an article recently, I think it was in the past year or so, from Indra Nooyi, the CEO of PepsiCo, I think she said it well, and to me it was, it really resonated with me. And she basically made the point, I'm not going to paraphrase her here, or I'm not going to quote her, but I'll paraphrase a bit. She basically said, every day you have to reprioritize what you're doing in order to truly, manage work life. So number one, I think it starts with knowing what your priorities are. So you really do have to spend the time and really think through what are your priorities. What are you willing to trade off on both sides, with your career and with your personal life? What are you willing to trade off? And then every day, though, you're going to be challenged on that, in making some trade-offs, very real-time trade-offs on, whether, what you need to do. And I think if you have at least the guidance that you set for yourself, that you can always turn to, that certainly helps. Helps you make those decisions in very real time. But I don't think anyone would ever say, and if they do, I wouldn't believe them, if they ever said they've got the perfect work-life balance, and that they're moving, moving up, continuing to move up in their careers. It does take work, but it is doable. It's doable, but it takes work, and it's challenging. I pulled this up recently. I had read this Forbes study from September of this year on 5 things you need to do to get the promotion you deserve. That was the title of the article. And interestingly enough, it reinforces some of what I just said. Number one, self-promote. It's really about, and here, Catalyst confirms this, that, women need to talk about what their accomplishments are. They need to talk about it not only to their friends, but they need to make sure the right people who are in positions of influence and influencing their careers know what they've done. Understand and embrace the politics. I mean, this is something interesting. I know I shy away from politics. I do not like the politics of the workplace. But in reality, you've got to be savvy in the politics. It doesn't mean you need to play all the politics. You don't need to even lead the politics, but you need to be savvy in it. You need to understand it. You need to understand who are the people, what the written rules are, and as it points out here, what are the unwritten rules. And you do need to abide by that, or at least operate within that realm. You need to operate within the scope of what you understand the written and unwritten rules to be. The next 3 really, in my opinion, are core, and you'll see we've built these into some of the programs within IBM. I think the key point on this next one, building a strategic network, the key word here is strategic. A lot of people have networks, and you naturally get some networks through your day-to-day job. Strategically building your network means really looking at who are those key influencers, the key influencers of either your business unit or an area that you want to go to within your business. Knowing who those are, knowing who the key decision makers are for your career as well, who are going to play a role in your career or could play a role in your career. and building that network, but more importantly, using that network. Making sure you have a sponsor and a coach, and I'll talk a little bit more about this shortly, but you know, knowing that you've got at least one sponsor, and a sponsor versus a coach and versus a mentor, a sponsor is someone who really is going to advocate for you. They're going to be in those meetings, whether it's 5-minute drills on someone to fill a position. They're going to be in those meetings talking about you as if they were you, you know, in the sense of they know what your accomplishments are. They are going to, you know, put their badge on the table and say, I really vouch for this person. That is a sponsor. And a coach is someone, it could be the same person, but it's good to have a bunch of coaches who are going to lay it on the line to you, kind of tell you the good and the bad, you know, really coach you on, you know, your strengths, and then more importantly, coach you on your weaknesses. So that's what the gist of women executives. Let me turn now to technical women. These are some facts that actually were published in 2009 timeframe by NCWIT. It's an industry organization. And I know I got involved in this even earlier than 2008, but these statistics are just startling to me. And if I don't know if all of you are on this call come from IT or technical backgrounds, the fact that IT jobs are still growing astronomically. I mean, Gartner has predicted, you know, forecasted that by next year, 2015, there'll be 4.4 million data science jobs alone, data analytics, data science jobs alone that will go unfilled, you know, and in the world. So this is the IT job opportunities are there, yet women representation in those jobs has declined, you know, 36% in 1991 to 25% in 2009. And worse, and I know RIT is very much focused on this in my discussions also as a board member, the fact that, and by the way, these statistics don't represent RIT, so I'll make that very clear as well, but the average of women, even though women hold 57% of that, or earn 57% of bachelor degrees, you know, back in 2008, 18% of comp sci degrees were earned by women in 2008. By the way, that percentage has not changed. So here we are in 2014. And this is down from the peak of 1985, right after I graduated from college. It was at 37%. We were in our heyday back when I graduated. So it's just very disturbing to see how, and by the way, engineering is even lower than that. Engineering degrees are even lower than 18%. And the next slide here, what's even more disturbing for a company like IBM, and should be for every company, is although women, you know, claim they love their work, so STEM women, you know, or in this case SET, so science, engineering, and technology, 74% of the NCWIT women surveyed love their job. 56% leave at mid-level. That's twice the rate that men leave at mid-level career. And even worse, 51% of the SET women that leave their careers abandon their training. That means they either don't, you know, leave the workforce totally, or they go into other jobs where they're not using their technical degrees or their technical experience. So very disturbing set of facts. By the way, you know, we see this to some degree at IBM, not to the degree of the percentages that you see here, but we certainly see a fall off in women at the mid-career level, technical leaders at the mid-career level. And as a result, this next slide I want to just mention some of the programs that we're doing within IBM. And again, I mention this not to promote IBM as much as to just share maybe some practices that I think could benefit this. Our chairman, you know, Ginny Rometty, asked us back in 2012 to look at these mid-career women that have left the field and what would we need to do to bring them back. You know, thinking of fields like business analytics, data analytics, and the impact it's having on every industry from healthcare, education, you name it. These should be, and the jobs that are available, these should be jobs that women should be very much interested in taking and using their skills for. So what we did was we started a program called Pathways, which focuses on bringing professional women back to a technical career path. And we're doing some things to really change the way we attract, using social media to try to appeal to these women, making them, understand these are not, the old-time jobs where, maybe you did computer programming sitting in your office and never spoke to a person for, your entire week in the office. The fact that these are jobs that are very interactive, working with industries, such as healthcare, such as, even industrial sector. I mean, there's so much application for IT. And then another important part of this is creating what we call on-ramps for women. So how do women at a mid-career level who may have been out of a technical role for, say, 2 to 5, maybe even 10 years, how do you get them back into technical leadership roles? So this development part of what we do with them is going to be very key. And then ensuring that they remain. How do we retain them then? What are the reasons they left in the first place? Are we truly addressing that so that they stay in the technical ranks? And the key components here of the programs that we're running are, number one, education. We've got to make sure that these women can very quickly get educated in the latest technologies and the latest strategic areas and the application of them. Second, coaches and sponsors. In our case, we have an technical executive level called Distinguished Engineer. We assign a Distinguished Engineer coach to each of these women in this program, and also a senior executive sponsor, someone who can really advocate, get to know this person and then advocate for them. And then last, we really force these women to put together a development plan, going back to the point earlier of really, create that plan. So we force them to put a short-term 12 to 24-month development plan in place that this coach and sponsor and their manager actually will help them execute on. Some of the criteria for success, although we're really early into this program, is, first and foremost, these women have to be technically astute, more than technically astute. They have to be seen as technical leaders. So, they're going to, mid-career women, anyone at the mid-career level in technical, right, are going to be held at a pretty high standard. They're going to be competing with others who never did leave the workforce. So getting that skills refresh and update is, I'll tell you, a very scary proposition for many of these women. I've met with some of them who really are hesitant to even get back into the workforce because they think they can never get to that level of competing. So making sure that we can get them back and get them at a level where they truly can compete and not fail. Second is, how do you then integrate very quickly women into an organization? You talk, going back to the politics statement, right? Making women aware of who are those decision makers, what are the written and unwritten rules, how do they operate to be most effective, because at the end of the day, they're going to be measured on outcomes, and they're going to be measured against their peers who are people, who know the organization really well. They have the benefit of being there longer. So really helping to integrate these women much more quickly into the organization and getting them known. Sense of community, we hear this from even women that have been at IBM for a long time, the need to feel a part of a community. And it doesn't have to just be with other women. It's who is their community, whether it's in their field or whether it's, whether it's in their geography. So we've been overtly trying to create communities where we can share with these women, they can share with each other, and have an ongoing dialogue. And then I've talked a lot here already about executive sponsorship and advocacy being absolutely critical, and this has come out in many, many studies externally. If you've read Lean In, I think Lean In points to that as well as Sheryl Sandberg points to that as another, real criteria for success. I also found this article as I was doing a little bit of research for this from Forbes in also 2014, the most undervalued leadership traits of women. Interesting enough, women are, these 6 things, opportunity-driven, they are strategic typically. Oftentimes we will think strategically, and that's thought of sometimes as maybe a fault because we may be focused on the task at hand or the outcome at hand that has a very, sudden deadline or an urgent deadline, and women to kind of step back. I know I do this quite a bit. I step back and say, well, wait, let's think about the big picture. So actually there's a lot of benefit to that, but yet still being focused on what the urgent deadline is at hand. Being passionate, I put this quote at the bottom here from Sheryl Sandberg, from her Lean In book on inspiring others is the most important universal principle of leadership. Women typically do this very well, right? They're more inspiration-driven, as it's quoted here from this Forbes article. They're more entrepreneurial, clearly demonstrated in the percentage of startups that women own and women start up. Oftentimes, our management style is done with very purposeful and meaningful objectives. We typically will talk about why we're doing things, and explain it sometimes maybe too much, and people don't get off the ground. But I think it's an important leadership style that, again, can be leveraged for good results. And then bringing traditions and family. I thought this was an interesting point that the Forbes article brought up, but bringing that, I do think, not to make your organizations or your teams feel like children, but I think there is a bit of, we focus on the growth and the development of our people typically, fairly well. And I'll end with this last slide. These are two programs that actually IBM got from the outside, from oh my goodness, I'm forgetting the name now. I should have put it on here. But there's an organization that's done something called Taking the Stage, and it's the I'll think of it and I'll get it out to you all, and maybe I'll think of it before this ends here. But Taking the Stage is it's a 4-part program. They have videos, and now they've just come out with a book actually on this. I just bought it for one of my friend's daughters who just graduated from college. But it really talks about these skills, these leadership skills that women oftentimes need to work on. It's how to show up. It's how to sit at the table. It's how to use your voice more effectively. So you see the names of these 4 modules. Choose, first of all, decide to take the stage. What's your script? Prepare your script. Unlock the power of your voice. Making your voice seem not tentative. Oftentimes women, and maybe I've done this on this call as well, I've been working on it, we say a lot, or we end our sentences with a question mark, in our voice, and an inflection in our voice where we, question versus when we're actually trying to make a statement. And then achieving presence. How do you really appear in a meeting? Do you sit in the corner or do you sit at the table? Do you sit at the head of the table? By the way, it's the Humphreys group that came up with Taking the Stage. And then a set of modules that were also written called Succeeding on the Stage. So once you've taken the stage, how do you now deal with these, unwritten rules? And you see some of the, how to communicate, how to develop this political savvy that, I talked about, how to really expand and use your network. So if you haven't seen these and haven't had the benefit of this, I really encourage you all to get these. In fact, IBM, we got 15 of our senior executives in a room a couple of years ago. We did videotapes of each of the 4 Taking the Stage modules, as well as we added another 11 or so modules. I did one on confidence, and there were others done. They're out on YouTube now. They just recently went out on YouTube. So I encourage you, if you're interested, certainly get the book and get the Humphreys Group's tapes in order to really work on these kinds of skills, because these are the makes or breaks, in my opinion. You could have all the technical knowledge, the marketing experience, whatever your field is, but if you don't have these leadership skills, what I kind of characterize as leadership skills, they will make or break you. And that's it. I think I took a little longer than I expected, but let's open this up for questions, because honestly, I think the interaction from a Q&A is where we all learn a whole lot more than what I could have ever imparted to you here. Any questions? or comments.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, sorry about that. We had a little technical glitch. Thank you so much, Susan, for sharing this valuable information that we can all use not only within our own organizations, but in our own careers. We do have some questions already for you, so let's begin. The first one is from Julie. She says, I understand that involving men in all stages of the advancement of women is crucial for success. Do you agree with this? And if so, how can men best support women's careers?
That's a great question, and absolutely. I mean, men are absolutely critical to this whole process. And considering the fact that 95% of the Fortune 500 CEOs are men, and then of course you go lower into the organizations, and there still is a much higher percentage of men in senior executive positions. They absolutely must play a key advocacy role, for women, and as well as overall focusing on the development of women and the placement of women into executive positions. I have found in the programs that we run, the Pathways programs, we actually run a workshop where we bring women, about approximately 10 to 15 women into, from around the world into our workshop, and they are to attend it with their distinguished engineer coach and their executive sponsor. And of course, we have a majority of the DE coaches and executive sponsors are men. I've had more incredible feedback from the men executive sponsors and DE coaches on the value of this program, and the fact that as they sat through this 3-day workshop, they learned things that they never realized. Some of the obstacles and some of the concerns and some of the fears and some of the realities of what these women candidates are facing in their day-to-day, their day-to-day jobs. So I think men, from multiple aspects, we need to, educate men on some things that maybe in some cases they don't realize, and oftentimes it's true, they don't realize it. And then they need to play that role. They need to be the advocates, because they're in, more often than women, right, are in, just by the statistics, are more often in those meetings where they can make those decisions. They can place those, advocate for women, place women in the, take risks. I put risks in quotes here, but take risks with women. What might be considered a risk for a one woman, may not really be a risk, but they have to be willing to take it. I will add one more comment. Very interesting observation over the past year. I run a council of senior vice presidents in IBM on our Pathways Women's Initiative. The amazing thing is, every meeting I have quarterly meetings. Most of them attend. Most of the senior vice presidents attend. Most of them, of course, are men, but they attend. My most vocal advocates are the men senior vice presidents who have daughters, who are either in college or just graduated college and are in the workforce. And they hear it firsthand from their daughters, and they become transformed overnight. And it's actually great to have them then as part of my senior VP council, because they make the decisions with us. They help us progress this. They invest money actually in these programs. So it's really quite exciting.
Great, thank you. So we have another question from Renee, and she said, you spoke a lot about the importance of marketing yourself. Can you give us an example of someone who does it well and why you think so?
Yeah, I'd say I'm not the best at this myself, although I've definitely improved over the years, because it's hard to, for me, to kind of blow my own horn, but I've certainly learned how to do that over the years. But I tell you, I've met some young, relatively young women recently who do this just extraordinarily well. They come, they get on my calendar, You know, they don't work for me, by the way. They'll come and get on my calendar because they want to get to know me, because they see who I am. They see that, you know, my position, what my career history has been, and they see I'm running the Pathways program. So they want me to get to know them, and they come in with, you know, just incredible, like they'll lay, the ones that impress me the most are those that, you know, lay out their plan. You know, they have a goal in mind, and, you know, in some cases maybe it is beyond them, but never, you know, I would never say that, but they've got a goal, and I think that's the most important thing. And so they've got a goal, and they've got a way that they want to get there. And, you know, and they talk about what they've done. They're able to net it out, you know, very succinctly, because keep in mind or know that a senior executive, especially in today's day and age, you know, especially our industry is moving so fast, people can't focus on an email or a blog or a report that is more than one page, you know, honestly. There's just no time. So netting out your accomplishments very succinctly, not going into all the detail of how you got there, because that's not as interesting as what it is you actually achieved and what was the outcome. They may then want to know how you got there because it tells you a little bit more about what your style is, but make sure they first understand the outcomes. So I would say women who do that, women and men who come in kind of are very confident or appear very confident on this is what I want to do or think I want to do, and this is how I think I want to get there. I want your advice, and, you know, interact on that is really quite impressive, and I think that impresses anybody, not just me.
Great, thank you.
Asking me to share my elevator speech.
Thank you. We have another question from Ella, and she said there are two types of factors that can affect women's careers. They include external forces that may generally be out of a woman's control, and there are more internal forces that women can control. What are some examples of things women can do to help themselves?
Yeah, this to me is really important, and I believe, and I would say Sheryl Sandberg really focused on this in her book, Leaned In. So if you haven't read it, I do encourage you, because she makes this point in the prologue of the book. She said, there's lots of things impacting the numbers and percentages we see today of women in executive ranks. I'm here, this is what she said, right, paraphrase, I'm here in this book talking about what you as a woman can do to change this for you. So I'm not going to talk about all the external, factors that need to be changed and should be changed, and, and maybe you can influence those as well, but really I'm going to talk about what you can do to change your, how you're perceived. And I thought that was really important because, I don't know if you read some of the flack she got after the book came out saying, she was ignoring, they claimed she was ignoring all the external factors and the fact that, a lot of work environments just aren't friendly to women and among other things. And I said, no, she says it right in the prologue, and she's absolutely right. There's a lot of things we can do. And I'll point you right back to the slide on taking the stage and succeeding on the stage, because I think those are the things you can do. I have the great fortune of attending a program, the FEW program with Women Unlimited, if any of you are familiar with it, that Jean Ott, the company that Jean Ott founded and Rosina Racciopi runs now. And they bring women, the FEW program in particular brings women at executive levels in, and there's about 20 of us that then for 9 months we meet one full day a month in person to really discuss, our careers, our progression, and work on it, right? And I attended this probably 8 years ago or so, but I'll never forget this one particular class where we were working on one of these skills, which was how to speak, how to portray and let your boss know that you want to be a CEO, for an example. So this one woman worked for the CEO of her company, and she wanted to be CEO, but she felt that she had been kind of pigeonholed in, I forget what job she was in, and she really felt that her CEO never thought of her in that way. And but she started out, our session with, you know, kind of saying my desire to be CEO of the company. So one day the head of Women Unlimited made her get up in front of the room and said, okay, pretend you're talking to your CEO. What would you say? And so she's up in front of all of us, and she, you know, basically said very silently, you know, very quietly, very tentative, her body language was very tentative, you know, I want to be CEO. And, you know, what we did, I won't go through the, you know, half hour that this poor woman went through in front of us, but what we worked on over the next half hour was getting her to be confident through her body language, through her voice, how she used her voice, on being able to state that, you know, very clearly and loudly, you know, and it was great. I mean, the transformation that she underwent, actually it may have been 15 minutes, not quite 30, but that it was very uncomfortable for her, but she did it, and it made a huge difference in the way she showed up. So I really think these working on yourself, working on how you show up, I could remember the days when I would be the only woman in a room full of males, and I was, you know, at this time, this is in the 80s when I was a young, you know, programmer, and I was doing some work with our competitor, for IBM, you know, looking at our competitors. So I had, you know, the lab director and a bunch of his executives in the room, and me. And I walk in, and of course, there are seats at the table, but I kind of felt, well, geez, I don't belong at the table because, you know, they're all executives, I'm not. And I would go sit in the corner. And I can't tell you how many times I did that until, you know, I went through some training. I think it was well before I went to taking the stage, but I went through some other training where the importance of sitting at the table makes all the difference, right? Can make a big difference. I shouldn't say all the difference, but it makes a big difference. And, you know, really showing up. And I've heard of great examples of women, I love when they tell me this, that where they've done something similar, where they sat in the back of the room and the man running the meeting actually pointed them out and told them to sit at the table. And I've had some great mentors in my career who also gave me, you know, publicly and privately, you know, pulled me into the conversation to make sure that I made a difference. So I really think a lot of the tips you'd get out of this taking the stage and of course, reading the book Leaned In, you know, hit on a lot of these things that women can do for themselves to make themselves much more marketable for that next position. And then, by the way, also ask for that next position. I think the other thing, and you've probably all seen the Harvard Business Reviews from way back, and I think there's even more today that, you know, more recently that have come out that all talk about how, you know, men make more than women largely because men ask and negotiate more. Women just take what they're given. They don't even ask. And I believe this is so true. I see it myself. So anyway, those are my little tidbits of advice.
We have a new question from Lacey. She said, earlier when you're talking about planning your career and learning about the jobs that are of interest to you, do you have any advice on how to approach individuals in those roles so that you can learn more about what they truly entail?
Yeah, I think that first of all is a great approach, right? You know, go find out what that job entails and go find out. I mean, it behooves you to do that rather than, you know, surmising what the job is and you know, going to your manager and saying, hey, I want to be that, and then have your manager give you his or her perceptions as to what that might take and why you might not be qualified, right? Go get it from the horse's mouth, right? So I'm a believer in pick up the phone or shoot them a text or an email and just say, hey, I'd love to get on your calendar just to learn more about your job. 9 times out of 10, if not honestly 10 times out of 10, I think people would be flattered and they make the time. I'll never forget when one of our senior vice presidents many, many years ago was speaking at a women's conference, and it was an external, it was an IBM women's conference when we used to hold them many years ago. She got up on stage and she said, you know, please approach me. She said, if you try to get on my calendar, it may take you several months because I'm very busy, but I will make the time for you. So please, you know, please do that. And I really believe that men and women, you know, will make the time if you tell them you want to learn, it's for your development and that you want to understand and learn. So be very direct. And if you get the door slammed in your face, they're probably not the right person you want in your network anyway. But I doubt you'll get the door slammed in your face.
Sarah asked, we hear a lot about work-life balance and more recently work-life integration. Can you give us some examples of how one can best achieve work-life integration that leads to both a fulfilling career and a personal life?
Yeah, this is very personal, for each individual on what will make you happy, as I alluded to before. So, I don't believe there is an ideal state that you achieve, in your career and then you stay at that state, of work-life integration. I really do think, as I said earlier, it takes work. It really does take work. But if you take the time, and I can't tell you how often I hear from women especially, I don't have time to plan, I don't even have time to have a meeting, with my mentor or my sponsor or my advocate, because I'm too busy. Well, I believe you control how busy you are. So you need to carve out, just like maybe you carve out, time to, go to, tend to, a doctor's appointment, for example, something you think you have to do, right? Carve out the time to, number one, develop your plan. What are your goals? What are your priorities as it relates to time you want to spend with your family, whether it's children, whether it's a significant other, whether it's, an elderly parent, or just time for yourself. Believe me, I carve out time for myself, which is usually time with my girlfriends, honestly. I find that to be the most energizing time. But if you don't plan it, it doesn't happen. So sitting down, taking the time to build your plan, build your priorities into that plan, and then even if you deviate, I'll give you an example with I've had children relatively late in my career. And life, for that matter. And it's something that I learned from others over the years, thankfully, other people largely that I manage, but how to, really set up, hey, these are my boundaries. I want to try to be home for dinner every night with my family. I work hard during the day, I work hard after dinner, but during dinner I want to be home with my family. And setting that as a boundary. Making sure I get on my calendar when all my children have my two children have events in different, at school. Making sure those are on my calendar, and when I have to travel, somewhere, I avoid that, or I avoid meetings. Now, getting that established up front, and I relate this to the plan that you create, getting that established then makes it a whole lot easier when things come in for you to make a decision, because you will have to make trade-offs. I mean, there are days where, yep, I do have to travel, and it's going to interfere with, one of my kids' events. In fact, I recently missed my son's World Championship baseball game. I've been to every single one before that, and I've been to every game in the season leading up to the World Championship, but it was unavoidable. I had to go on this trip, right? So you won't 100%, meet your plan oftentimes, but, if you achieve it 75% of the time, that's better than not having a plan and letting life and work just overtake you, and therefore you don't meet it even 50% of the time. So I'm a big believer in build that plan, build your priorities, but don't fool yourself. Every day you're going to, pretty much every day you're going to be challenged to make a trade-off, and if you got that guide, with you, it helps you make that trade-off.
Great, thank you. That's all the time we have for Q&A. Additional questions can be emailed to ritalum@rit.edu or tweeted to @RIT_alumni with the hashtag #MeRITWebinars, and we will direct your questions to Susan.